The attorney's voice cracked as he read the document aloud. To Margaret Chen, who gave me coffee and dignity when I had nothing, I leave the entirety of my estate, valued at $4.2 million. Margaret's paper cup slipped from her hand, splashing cheap diner coffee across the law office carpet. Her fingers, cracked from years of dish soap and industrial cleaner, trembled as she stared at the man in the expensive suit. This couldn't be real. The homeless man from the bus stop was dead, and he'd been a multimillionaire? 7 years earlier, Margaret's alarm buzzed at 4:15 a.m. She silenced it before the sound could wake her daughter sleeping on the pull-out couch 3 feet away. In the darkness of their efficiency apartment, she dressed in yesterday's clothes. Black pants with a grease stain near the knee, white shirt worn thin at the elbows. Lily was 8, small for her age, her face peaceful in sleep. Margaret kissed her forehead, left a note on the kitchen counter, and slipped out into the pre-dawn cold. The bus stop at 5th and Morrison was empty except for one man. He sat on the bench in layers of stained clothing, a wool cap pulled low, his beard long and matted. A shopping cart filled with plastic bags stood beside him like a loyal dog. Margaret had seen him before. Everyone had. Most people crossed the street. She waited, shivering. The January wind cut through her thin jacket. She'd given her winter coat to Lily last week when a school nurse called about her daughter walking home in the snow without proper clothing. The man coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Margaret looked at him. Really looked. His hands were purple with cold. His eyes, when they briefly met hers, held something she recognized, the exhaustion of surviving one more day. On impulse, she walked to the 7-Eleven on the corner. She had $3.47 in her purse, enough for bus fare and nothing else. She bought one coffee. Black. It cost $1.29. Back at the bus stop, she held it out to him. "It's cold," she said simply. The man stared at the cup like it might disappear. Then, slowly he took it. His hands shook as he wrapped them around the warmth. "Thank you," he whispered. The bus came. Margaret climbed on, wondering how she'd get home without the return fare. She worked 2 jobs. Morning shift at Rosie's Diner, 5 a.m. to 1 p.m., washing dishes, bussing tables, cleaning bathrooms. Then she took the bus across town to Valley View Nursing Home, where she worked as a care aide from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., 16 hours on her feet. $7 an hour at the diner, 9 at the nursing home. Lily stayed with Mrs. Rodriguez next door before and after school. Margaret paid her in whatever she could, groceries she got on discount, help with cleaning, promises that someday she'd pay real money. That night, Margaret walked home from the bus stop, 2 miles, because she'd given away her bus fare. Her feet screamed. Her back felt like someone had driven nails into her spine. But when she opened the door and found Lily doing homework at the kitchen table, none of it mattered. "How was school, baby?" "Good. I got a B+ on my math test." Margaret hugged her daughter tight, inhaling the scent of discount shampoo and childhood. This was why she survived. This was everything. The next morning, the homeless man was at the bus stop again. Margaret bought him coffee. "What's your name?" she asked, handing it over. "James," he said quietly. "I'm Margaret. This is," she caught herself. She'd almost said, "our stop," as if they shared something. "Thank you, Margaret." It became routine. Every morning, Margaret bought James coffee. Some days she could afford a muffin too. Most days, just coffee. They didn't talk much. James seemed to exist in his own world, and Margaret was too tired for conversation. But she noticed things. James never drank alcohol, never asked for money. He read actual books, pulled from his shopping cart, the pages yellowed and worn. Sometimes he did crossword puzzles in newspapers he found in the trash. One morning, 6 months in, Lily asked, "Mom, why do we always run out of milk on Thursdays?" Because Thursday was the day before payday, and Margaret had been buying James coffee every morning for 26 weeks. Just bad planning, sweetie. That afternoon at the nursing home, Margaret was changing Mr. Patterson in room 12 when her supervisor appeared. "Margaret, you've been here 2 years. You're reliable. Good with the residents. I'm promoting you to senior care aide. 50 cents more per hour. 50 cents. $4 a day. $20 a week." Margaret's eyes burned. "Thank you." She kept buying James coffee. Year 2, James started talking. Small things. The weather. A book he was reading. Once, he mentioned he'd been a professor. Margaret didn't ask what happened. She understood that everyone's fall from grace had its own story, and sometimes those stories were too painful to tell. Year 3, Lily got sick. Pneumonia. The emergency room bill was $2,800. Margaret set up a payment plan, $100 a month, which meant no savings, no cushion, nothing extra. She still bought James coffee. Year 5, James wasn't at the bus stop for 3 weeks. Margaret worried he'd frozen to death, been arrested, or simply moved on. Then one morning he returned, thinner, shakier. Hospital, he explained. Pneumonia. Margaret handed him his coffee. Their fingers touched briefly. Both sets of hands cracked. Both lives held together by threads. Year 7. Day 2555. James wasn't at the bus stop. For a week, the bus stop felt wrong without James. Margaret still bought coffee, then poured it out in the trash can, unable to drink what had become his. On the 8th day, a man in a gray suit approached her. "Excuse me, are you Margaret Chen?" Her first thought was debt collector. Her second was immigration officer, though she was born in Seattle. Her third was police. "Yes. My name is Robert Whitfield. I'm an attorney. I've been looking for you for several days. It's regarding James Donnelly." The name sounded raw. James was just James. No last name, no history beyond the bus stop. "Is he okay?" Whitfield's expression softened. "I'm afraid Mr. Donnelly passed away 9 days ago. Heart failure. He was in hospice." Margaret felt the cold seep deeper. 7 years of coffee, of small kindnesses, of shared silence. Gone. He left instructions, Whitfield continued. Very specific ones. He wanted me to find you and deliver this. He handed her an envelope. Her name was written on it in shaky handwriting. The same handwriting she'd seen on James's crossword puzzles. Inside was a letter and a business card. "Dear Margaret, for 7 years, you saw me when everyone else looked away. You gave me coffee when you could barely afford bus fare. You treated me like a human being when the world had decided I wasn't one. I wasn't always homeless. Once, I was a professor of economics at Columbia University. I had a wife, a home, a retirement fund. Then my wife died, and I discovered she'd been battling cancer in secret, leaving me with $800,000 in medical debt. I lost everything. My house, my savings, my will to keep going. I disappeared into the streets because it was easier than facing what I'd become. But every morning, you reminded me I still mattered. Your daughter needed milk, but you bought me coffee. You worked 16 hours a day, but you never walked past me like I was invisible. You saved my life in the ways that count. 2 years ago, my wife's sister tracked me down. She'd been searching for years. It turned out my wife had a life insurance policy I never knew about. She'd kept it secret because she knew I'd use it for her treatment and leave nothing for myself. It paid out $3.2 million after her death. I've been living in a small apartment since then, getting my health in order, managing the money carefully. I still came to our bus stop every morning because I needed to see you, needed to know that goodness still existed in the world. I've been sick for months. The doctors say it's my heart. I'm writing this from hospice, and I'm not afraid anymore because of you. Please see my attorney. I've made arrangements. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for seeing me." James. Margaret read it 3 times, tears streaming down her face, before she could speak. What arrangements? That's how she ended up in Whitfield's office, listening to words that made no sense. "For $0.2 million, she whispered. "That's not. I don't understand." Whitfield shuffled papers. Mr. Donnelly was very clear. His wife's life insurance paid $3.2 million. He invested conservatively and lived simply. Over 2 years, it grew to $4.2 million. His will states that you are the sole beneficiary. But I just bought him coffee. That's not worth. To him it was worth everything. Whitfield interrupted gently. "Mrs. Chinon, do you know what you did? You gave a man who had lost his reason to live a reason to wake up every morning. You treated him with dignity when he'd forgotten what dignity felt like. You sacrificed your own comfort, consistently, for 7 years, to ease someone else's suffering." Margaret thought of all the mornings. The cold, the exhaustion, the times she'd walked home because she'd given James her bus fare. The nights Lily had eaten cereal for dinner because there was no money for groceries after buying that morning's coffee. "There are conditions," Whitfield continued. "Mr. Donnelly established a trust. You'll receive $100,000 immediately, for immediate needs," he specified. The remainder is structured to pay you $120,000 annually. For life, with the principal going to your daughter upon your death. Margaret's mind reeled. $120,000 a year. She currently made $28,000. He also left you this. Whitfield placed a shoebox on the desk. Inside were 2,555 small pieces of paper, one for each day. Each one had a date in a single sentence. January 15th, 2016. Today Margaret's hands looked so cold, but she still smiled. March 3rd, 2017. Margaret bought me a muffin even though her shoes have holes. December 24th, 2019. Margaret came even on Christmas Eve. She said Lily was with her grandmother, so she had time. She's lying. She works every holiday. She came for me. Margaret sobbed. James had documented every single day, every coffee, every moment of kindness she thought was too small to matter. There's one more thing, Whitfield said quietly. Mr. Donnelly purchased a life insurance policy 2 years ago, separate from the inheritance. It pays out $500,000 to establish a foundation in your name. He left instructions that it should help working mothers in crisis. Women like you who sacrifice everything for their children. I don't know how to run a foundation. You'll have help. I'm named as co-trustee, along with a financial advisor. Your job is simply to identify who needs help. You're uniquely qualified for that, Mrs. Chen. That evening, Margaret picked up Lily from Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, as always. But nothing was the same. Baby, sit down. I need to tell you something. She explained about James, about the inheritance, about how their lives were going to change. Lily, 12 now and frighteningly perceptive, listened carefully. Then she asked, Mom, are you going to stop working? Margaret thought about it. The diner, the nursing home, the exhaustion that lived in her bones. Not yet, she said finally. But I'm going to work less. And I'm going to be home more. And we're going to have dinner together every night. Lily hugged her fiercely. Will you still buy people coffee? Margaret smiled through her tears. Yes, always. 3 months later, Margaret walked through the doors of Rosie's diner for the last time as an employee. She'd given notice, worked her final shifts, and said goodbye to the kitchen that had consumed her mornings for 9 years. But she wasn't leaving completely. Rosie, she said to the owner, a gruff woman who'd never been unkind, but never been particularly kind either. I want to buy you lunch. Over coffee and eggs, Margaret explained. She was establishing a program. Any single parent who worked at the diner would receive free childcare at a new facility she was opening 2 blocks away. Hours, for a.m. to midnight. Certified caregivers. Educational activities. All free. Why? Rosie asked, suspicious of generosity. Because I know what it's like to choose between your child's safety and your job. Nobody should have to make that choice. The Margaret Chen Foundation opened 6 months after James's death. The child care center came first. Then a free medical clinic for uninsured working families. Then an emergency fund. Grants up to $5,000 for people facing eviction, medical bills, or other crises that minimum wage couldn't absorb. Margaret still worked, but differently now. She visited the nursing home once a week as a volunteer, spending time with residents who had no family. She worked at the foundation office 3 days a week, reviewing applications, meeting families, remembering what it felt like to be desperate. And every morning, she went to the bus stop at 5th and Morrison. A new man sat there now, younger, maybe 30, with haunted eyes and a sleeping bag wrapped around his shoulders. Margaret bought him coffee. What's your name? She asked. David. I'm Margaret. I'll be here tomorrow too. She kept that promise. Every morning. But now she could afford bus fare and groceries and a winter coat that kept her warm. Now Lily had new shoes and school supplies and a college fund that would cover any university she chose. 1 year after James's death, Margaret stood at his grave. She'd had a proper headstone installed. James Donnelly, professor, friend, teacher of kindness, he saw the world clearly. I miss our mornings, she said to the stone. I miss your quietness. I miss the way you'd smile when the coffee was still hot. She placed a cup of coffee on the grave, black, from 7-Eleven, the same as always. You taught me something, James. You taught me that small acts matter. That showing up matters. That seeing people, really seeing them, can change everything. The foundation helped 127 families in its first year. Single mothers, mostly. Women working 2 jobs, raising kids alone. drowning in the impossible arithmetic of poverty. The foundation paid rent, covered medical bills, provided childcare, offered hope. Margaret met with each family personally. She saw herself in their cracked hands, their exhausted eyes, their fierce determination to give their children better lives. One woman, Teresa, worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford her son's asthma medication. The foundation covered it. 6 months later, Teresa sent a letter. My son hasn't been to the emergency room in 4 months. He's playing soccer. I can breathe again. Thank you for seeing us. Margaret kept every letter, just like James had kept every date. On the 2nd anniversary of James's death, Margaret visited Lily at college, Georgetown University, where her daughter was studying social work. You know what I realized? Lily said over dinner. All those years, I thought we were poor. And we were. But we were also rich in the ways that mattered. You taught me that people are more important than things. That kindness isn't optional. Your childhood was hard, Margaret said quietly. I'm sorry for that. My childhood was full of love, Lily corrected. You worked yourself to exhaustion for me. You gave away bus fare to help a homeless man. You showed me what it means to be human. I wouldn't trade that for anything. Margaret squeezed her daughter's hand, overwhelmed by gratitude. For James, for the impossible gift he'd given them, for the chance to help others the way they'd once needed help. That night, alone in the hotel room, Margaret counted. 7 years of coffee, 2,555 days, approximately $3,300 in coffee and occasional muffins. Money she couldn't afford to spend. James had turned it into millions, not just for her, but for hundreds of families who would benefit from the foundation for years to come. But that wasn't the real return on investment. The real return was the 12-year-old girl who'd asked, "Mom, will you still buy people coffee?" The real return was knowing that Lily had learned to see the invisible people, to value kindness over comfort, to understand that humanity wasn't measured in bank accounts. The real return was the man named David at the bus stop, who now had coffee every morning and someone who remembered his name. Margaret returned home to Seattle the next day. At 4:30 a.m., she stood at 5th and Morrison. David was already there, huddled against the cold. "Morning, David." "Morning, Margaret." She handed him his coffee, black, hot, from 7-Eleven. His hands wrapped around it carefully, and in his eyes she saw what she'd given James all those years ago: recognition, dignity, proof that he still existed in someone's world. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're welcome," Margaret said. "See you tomorrow." The bus came. Margaret climbed on, her heart full. She still sat in the 3rd seat from the back, but now she paid full fare and gave away bus passes to anyone who needed them. She still wore sensible shoes, but now they were new and didn't hurt. She still worked hard, but now she chose when and how and why. James had given her more than money. He'd given her the freedom to be the person she'd always been, someone who saw suffering and couldn't look away, without destroying herself in the process. And every morning, as she rode through the awakening city, Margaret whispered a prayer of thanks for the homeless man who taught her that no act of kindness is ever wasted, that small gestures compound into miracles, and that sometimes the people we're helping are actually saving us. The coffee had always been the smallest part. The seeing, that was everything.